everyone, welcome to the Stage Door Show. I'm Dave Hondel. Tonight, I'm honored to have with me a true Hollywood legend. He began his career as a child actor and has been in some of the most memorable TV shows and movies in the history of entertainment. I'm a big fan of his, and I can't wait to talk about his amazing career. So please welcome Mr. Clint Howard to the show. Thank you for doing this, Clint. I really appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure, Dave, and those are very, very kind words. Thank you.
Absolutely. All true. And, I want to start with this because I know your parents were actors, Rance Howard and Gene Spiegel, and of course your brother, Ron. You've always been around acting, but I understand your dad grew up on a farm. So have you ever thought back and thought, how your life would have been different if he chose farming as opposed to acting? Would that have changed things for you at all?
Oh, yes. 180 degrees. It would have changed things. Both my brother and I, we are so grateful that dad and mom, but dad was a farm boy, that he made the show business bug bit him, and he had the audacity and the tenacity to venture out and chase it.
Yeah.
And I'm forever grateful. And he started the wheels in motion because there were no other wheels towards entertaining people, not in my mom's side of the family or not in dad's side of the family. There were no closet musicians. There were no closet poets. There were no, no. So it was both mom and dad. And this is back in they were both born in the late 20s. So, they grew up in the 30s. They grew up in the Depression.
Yeah, for sure.
And so anyway, we are really grateful that they made the decisions they made and put the wheels in motion for, Ron and I to have careers entertaining people and giving us an opportunity to be artistic. And then of course now, generationally, Ron's got a couple of kids, Bryce and Paige, they're entertainers, so it's a generational thing. And my daughter, albeit adopted, Rafi, she is venturing into the entertainment business. And so, it's not just about now, it's about the future.
Yeah. When you started, obviously back when you were a child, one of the questions I want to ask you is, now things have obviously evolved in the business through so many years with, being, hardly any channels on TV or networks. And now there's hundreds and hundreds of streaming, platforms and ways to entertain people. And, there's obviously more opportunities for people out there if they want to be an actor or a performer, and I'm not just talking acting, but I'm talking musicians that play music to scorers, when they score TV shows and movies. There's more opportunities for people in the industry. So you've been through all this evolution. And so talk about that evolution since when you started, but do you feel that it's evolved to the point where it's better for people in the industry, or do you feel that there's more competition, or what are your thoughts on the whole evolution of this business?
Well, gee, Dave, you ask a question there, or a series of questions.
Yeah.
That could unfold into days and days and days of discussion. First of all, when I got started, there were 3 networks. There were a handful of studios that made motion pictures to be shown in theaters. There were no DVDs. There was no VHSs. It was, of course, there was no internet. It was a very limited time. And now, my goodness, there are literally hundreds of thousands of active YouTube channels. And anybody with a phone and a connection to the internet can launch a YouTube channel and present their ideas and present their form of artistry and entertainment to the public. Little kids and whatever kind of TikTok. My goodness, Kat and I's daughter, Rafi, she does these TikToks. Now she dances. She loves to dance. She's also a musician and she's an actress. But like on TikTok, literally she'll do dozens and dozens and dozens of TikToks, weekly, and it's their form of expression. And it's great. Listen, that's one thing. When I was young, kids didn't have an opportunity to express themselves creatively very often. School plays was about it if you weren't a professional.
Right.
And so nowadays the opportunity to express yourself is just, far greater and amazing. And I think it's wonderful. Does it create more competition? Of course it does. Of course it does. Because, anybody with a cell phone and a dream can make a film. I think people should. People should make films. But I'll tell you what, it all comes down to the story. Myself, as an entertainer, I have primarily been just an actor. Now I have done some writing and I've done some producing, and I've got my eye on projects, creatively behind the camera. But primarily, I've just been an actor. But I'll tell you what, the whole thing is it's the story. What story are you trying to tell? And it goes all the way back to men and women sitting around a campfire telling others stories.
Yeah.
And especially men and women sitting around a campfire telling their children stories, and nowadays we're not around campfires. We have our cell phones and we're making short films, but it's all about the story. You have to remember that if you don't have a story that people are interested in absorbing and reacting to, then, it's going to fall on deaf ears.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And, and just making TikToks, your daughter making TikToks, as my daughter does as well. And it's hard work. I mean, it's, people, just because we have the technology. I mean, a lot of work goes into those, a lot of time and effort goes into those, and some of the biggest entertainers right now are social media stars and entertainers on social media, because people love to have their phone with them, and everywhere they go, they're watching these short, TikTok videos. And, that kind of leads into my next question. Do you feel that the TikTok society that we're in right now, that people tend to have shorter attention spans, where they're more drawn to these shorter, I guess, videos, as opposed to sitting and watching a feature length film? Do you feel that has hurt the industry in that way, or do you feel a story is a great story no matter how it's told?
Well, yes, the attention span certainly has lessened, and it is, there's not really an escape button in a movie theater.
Right.
You can get up and walk away. And then when television was invented, and especially with the remote control, you can flip the channel, hit the clicker. You hit the clicker and you can try something else. And now, my goodness, the escape button is just at the tip of your thumb.
Right.
So it certainly changed the way people are viewing entertainment, and it has changed the way people who create the entertainment are thinking.
Right.
It used to be got a half-hour program, and now it's can you tell a story in a few minutes?
Right.
Can you tell a story? Can you even tell a story in a few seconds? Years ago, I did a thing for Funny or Die, which is a website that Will Ferrell and his people sort of invented, and it's all comedy. 99% of it is comedy. And I did a couple of Funny or Die videos, and they actually did a joke it was an April Fool's joke, where they had a bunch of their celebrity contributors do 2-second videos.
Wow.
And it was actually, when I was told about it, I went, my God, what can you do in 2 seconds? As it turns out, you can actually do quite a bit. You can get a laugh in 2 seconds. And I will never forget this. Fred Willard, the wonderful,
Love
wonderful
Fred Willard. Yeah.
He was a wonderful human being, and I'm so grateful I got to be in his presence. I worked with him. We exchanged creativity together, but we were on set doing another Funny or Die video when this idea of, hey, let's shoot a 2-second video. And it was all kind of a gag for Funny or Die. I did one. Mine was, I completely, I just did Rosebud. But Fred Willard immediately invented this very funny thing that lasted 2 seconds. He got on a tricycle. He put the tricycle on the inside of a stairwell going uphill. And he had the cameraman swoosh pan down to his face. And he just, with a big smile on his face, he said, "Let's go." And when you saw the little 2-second video, it was so friggin' funny.
Yeah.
So that's the ultimate. Can you entertain people in 2 seconds?
It's a challenge. Yeah, but you can do it for sure.
It's a challenge and it's cool. Listen, Dave, the technology has created a bunch of new challenges, and the one thing that and I'm sure ultimately you're probably going to ask me this question, which is artificial intelligence. That artificial intelligence, I think it's going to be a long time before it replaces the human soul.
Oh, for sure. It never will. I don't think.
Well, never say never.
Yeah.
Never say never. There's just something about this world. It's moving really fast.
Yeah.
And exponential computer processing.
Yeah.
Speed of computers and the ability to run all this stuff real fast. It's just exponentially growing. So my God, a lot of people would say all bets are off.
Yeah.
But I believe that the human being still has a spark in their soul that is interesting and it can't be duplicated.
Right. I agree.
So, listen, that's the case. Although I'll tell you what, I'll just be really honest for you and the people that are viewing. I am certainly glad I was born in 1959. Yeah. And I'm certainly glad that my professional career was in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s and up until 2025. As a young guy, if I was 21 or 22 years old right now, it's an amazing world with a lot of amazing possibilities, but it's also amazingly scary.
Yeah, I agree. And I grew up on Gentle Ben. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, born in 68. So I grew up in the 70s on your show. One of my favorite shows of all time growing up, because what I liked about it, I grew up in Minnesota on lakes. I was always on lakes, and it's the first time I ever saw an airboat, first time in my life. And I'm like, what is that? That was the coolest thing I've ever seen, and with you and Dennis Weaver and the bear. And I mean, it was just a great, I love the concept for the show. And what was it like, working as a child, but did you realize the enormity, I guess, of what you were doing, working with Dennis Weaver and working on a popular TV show like that? Did it kind of make sense to you at the time? Did you know that you were actually, it was like a job to you, or was it something that you started doing just as a kind of a fun thing to do? And I mean, obviously you were a serious actor too.
It was a job,
right?
I learned very early on from my parents that, acting is fun. Acting is like, playing with your buddies, except you get better props,
It's a job. Yeah.
But it is a job. And at 4 or 5 years old, I understood. I mean, when I was really, really little, I was just, I don't consider it really counting. I was learning by osmosis.
Right.
But by the time I was 5 or 6 years old, I completely understood that. No, I'm in the adult world here,
right?
And there's an expectation of me behaving like a professional.
Yeah,
and I didn't feel any pressure. It was just part of the job description, And yeah. I am so wonderfully grateful that my dad, because he was the one that was pretty much with us. I'll speak for myself. He was with me almost all the time of my career. I mean, sure. I didn't miss there. In fact, I tell this story. I've told this story before. It's not really a story. It's just a fact. There was never one day in my juvenile career, started when I was 2 and finished when I was 17, that there was never a guardian or another family member. No one ever watched me on the set other than mom or dad. And
Yeah.
and 95% of the time it was dad. And he inculcated such wonderful, job presence, the skills. I learned how to be a pro with my
Yeah.
dad. And I miss him terribly. He's been gone now for several years. And my brother and I wrote a book called
Yep.
The Boys, a memoir of Hollywood and family. And it was really a love letter to dad and mom,
Yeah.
because they were both gone when Ron and I decided to write the book.
Sure.
And we're both grateful that the dad was around, giving us these great life lessons, and lessons about the industry. One thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to drop down and I'm going to talk a little bit about as you're venturing out into this career where you're entertaining people, is don't be intimidated. There was one thing that my brother and I both recognized about my dad, is he just was not intimidated by any situation or anybody. He was neither intimidated nor intoxicated
Right.
by fame. My dad didn't my dad didn't give a crap about fame. He gave a
Mhm.
crap about doing good work so he could continue to do good work,
Yeah.
because he wanted to be an actor a lot more than he wanted to be a farmer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and also was talking about your book, which was an instant and New York Times bestseller, by the way. And your niece, I believe, Bryce, wrote the foreword. Is that correct?
Yeah. Bryce wrote the forward, and I'm actually, proud of myself. I was the one that Ron and I were fishing around for people who might write the forward. I think, Ron maybe threw the name Tom Hanks out there, and we had other people that we thought might be, sexy people to join us in the journey. And I thought, hey, how about Bryce? It's generational, and she's got a perspective. All of her life, she's watched her dad and her uncle entertain people, and she also was around. My dad was around long enough. Bryce knew my mom and my dad.
Yeah.
She had a loving relationship with grandma and grandpa. So
Right.
anyway, and when we asked her, Ron thought it was a pretty good idea. So did the publisher. So did our editor. So anyway, points for my team.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that was great. And also working with your brother. First of all, I love movies from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. I think I wish we had more movies like Apollo 13, and I wish we had, even like there was a movie that I saw you in that I still to this day I've seen it so many times, but Far and Away was one of my favorite movies because cinematically I thought it was just beautifully shot, and just everything about it was just beautiful. And you talk about your experience on that film, because I just Flynn, your character, I loved the character. I loved everything about that movie. So talk about your experience on that one.
Well, that was at a really important part of my life, because I had been living kind of a dark, troubled life for a while. And I decided to change things. And I put the plug in the jug and I started to get myself healthy. And then I got the opportunity. Ron said, hey, I'd love to have you be in this movie. And I said, yeah, I need the work and I would love to participate. And so it was in 1991 is when we made Far and Away. And it was a great experience, and it meant a lot to me personally to get to work on this. I felt like I was taking a big leap into adulthood. I was, my 20s was a little mixed up, but then I kind of turned my life around and I started, living right, um, getting a chance to work on Far and Away, and then recognizing that, it is a piece of our family history. We had relatives, this distant relatives, that ran in the Cherokee land race. Oklahoma did this a lot, where they gave away land. It wasn't just a one-time thing or a two-time thing. It's the way Oklahoma settled,
Wow.
and that's why they call themselves Oklahoma Sooners. I mean, the football team, the sports teams for the University of Oklahoma,
Sure.
they're called the Sooners. And it's because guys would, sneak out and sooner than they were supposed to, they were going to get their land. I was really proud of my brother. First of all, my brother was a very young filmmaker when he made that movie, and it was a big movie. And I felt like he handled the comedy and the drama. I felt like he had a wonderful approach making that movie. And, I felt like that was, his two film editors, Dan Hanley and Mike Hill, they helped cut a great movie together, and Ron, the casting up and down the casting was great. Of course, Tom and Nicole, but Tom Gibson, who played kind of the villain, and then I'm brain locking on who played Nicole's parents. But and it was a wonderful movie, and I really appreciate you mentioning it.
Yeah, no, I one of my favorite movies, and of course Apollo 13, and I kind of know the story a little bit about that. How Ron had kind of asked you what character you wanted to play, and that one kind of stood out to you because you knew it wasn't going to get put on the cutting room floor. Is that a true story?
Oh yeah, completely. By that time in my career and my relationship with Ron, I mean, he would call me and say, "What do you think?" And I had read the script, and I was a big fan of the space program, but I also was a fan of my brother's work, and I realized how he worked. And I thought, I got to find something that isn't going to be superfluous to the film, because I wanted to have some meat. I wanted to have some meat in the picture,
right?
And getting to do scenes with Ed Harris and stuff. I mean, I picked well on that one. Appreciate it, Dave. Thank you.
Well, yeah, for sure. And I guess as I talked about a little bit before we started recording is, we celebrate independent artists. There's a lot of folks that listen that are just getting started in this business, either in the theater, film, TV, that type of thing. But what kind of advice would you have for somebody just getting started? I know that's a broad question, but is there one piece of main advice from your many years of doing this that you would give to somebody that was just getting started in this?
Yes, I do have advice. And that advice is do it. The advice is also live within your means and be prepared to sacrifice. And speaking specifically about, film and television, be prepared for a 10-year run at getting your foot in the door. This is not going to be easy. This is not you can't put yourself on a 2-year plan. Jesus, but 2 years, you're not even getting your feet wet. You're not even learning how to network. You're not even following any leads to get anywhere. I mean, you got to understand it. You got to be patient. You also have to be able to live cheap. You can't expect to be driving new cars around. You can't expect to be living in the lap of luxury when you are a struggling artist. You have to understand that you're going to struggle, and it's your choice, and just learn to live on the cheap. You don't need friggin' 200 cable channels. You don't need an overhead that sends you to the poorhouse. You live within your means, and you start from there, and then give yourself an opportunity to be creative. And also, this is something that you can certainly miss on, but you got to surround yourself with good people.
100%.
Not everybody you run into is good people. You can run into people, and after a period of time, you can realize, well, they have ulterior motives, or, what their heart is not pure. And then you have to make that's in life, though. That's in life.
100%. Yeah. So honored to have you on, Clint, and thank you for taking the time tonight. I know you got to run, but I just really appreciate the time, and, welcome back on the show anytime.
It's my pleasure, Dave. I appreciate that, and maybe our paths will cross.